What's the most unethical parenting hack you know? Tell your kid that they snore in their sleep really often. That way you'll know if they're pretending to sleep, because they'll fake snore. Saw this video on Instagram. When it's past their bedtime, dad changes the language on the TV to Spanish. When the kids act confused, he says it must be because you're tired. My kid went up for reading levels over COVID lockdown. Everyone thought I was really putting in a big effort with his reading. Truth is, I just turned on subtitles on the TV. While 3 out of 4 of us were independent readers from an early age, including my dyslexic sister, my brother struggled a lot when he was young and just overall had very little interest in reading, especially anything he had to read in school. So Dad bought Final Fantasy and other relatively text-heavy video games specifically to give my brother things to read that would hold his interest, and things that had a practical to a small child use to him, such as figuring out his equipment. I'm sure some would find that unethical, just putting a kid down in front of video games, but I sure as hell don't. Especially because Dad also read fairly advanced fantasy novels to us every night to further ignite that interest. My brother eventually became an avid reader of fantasy novels. He knew if he wanted to get the story, he had to read it. A lot of kids pick up a second language that way, too, watching subtitled foreign television and movies. My nephew refused to vacuum, so I told him the thing about the vacuum sucking up ghosts. I said that vacuuming kept houses from getting haunted. That's why haunted houses are so dusty. 10 years later, he is still a neat freak, and I feel responsible. You're a genius, and it literally has so many supporting references for this lie. Ghostbusters ... vacuums, dusty haunted houses, Luigi's Mansion, Casper the Friendly Ghost movie. My parents took advantage of my short-term memory. They'd give me a toy, wait until the new shine wore off, and I favored others. They'd hide it and regift it, and I'd be excited about it again. We do a version of this but call it toy rotation. When they start getting bored of their toys that they have out, we pack them up and pull the other boxes out of their closet and unpack those. It's like Christmas all over again. No new toys, they're the same old toys, but they love it. We rotate them every month to 2 months. Told our daughter that the kids' ears turn red when they lie, but only parents can see it. She would enter rooms with her hands covering her ears, and we knew we were in for a lie. LOL. My mom told my brother he raised his left eyebrow when he lied. He is 45 years old, and his face still visibly tenses up to try and keep his eyebrow stable when he lies. And sure, your kids won't bother you by telling them to wake you up in an hour so we can start cleaning the house. They will do anything to avoid waking you. Ha ha ha. Then when you finally wake up, after they've been playing quietly so as to not wake you, you must continue the charade and ask them why didn't they wake you up. Now you'll all have to clean another time. That'll drive it home, and they'll let you sleep every time. I let the laundry build up and up. Then once a week go to my bedroom with chocolate snacks, a hot cup of tea and Netflix, to fold the washing. I tell them anyone who comes in has to help. I don't see any of them the entire time. This would definitely backfire on me, and I would be cleaning the house at 6 a.m. with 2 enthusiastic kids leaving a trail of devastation behind them. An ethical childing hack: raised Catholic, church every Sunday. So we'd time things and bring them breakfast in bed so that, by the time they choked down burnt toast and soggy cornflakes, it was too late to make it to Mass. Worked best if you sent the youngest two in with the tray. Sometimes they were hungover enough the very appearance of the tray prevented church. Years later, Mom and Dad would talk about how terrible those breakfasts were, but how it would have been mean to reject it. We didn't care if you liked it, we just didn't want to go to church. If your toddler accidentally touches something hot, you have the opportunity to tell him many things in the house are also hot and should be avoided. When my cousin was a toddler, she had this happen in reverse. She learned that she shouldn't touch hot things, but never actually touched those things enough to associate the term with a sensation. So to her, the word hot meant thing I'm not allowed to touch for about a year. If you told her don't touch that for any given item, she'd point at it and say hot. This may have worked better for me since one of the kids' parents has hearing loss, but I told my 4 at the time nephew that I couldn't hear whining, but if he would like to try again in a different tone of voice, I could understand him better. Right now I could see his lips move, but that was all. He did an admirable job with modulation after that, and I got him what he'd asked for. I used to tell my son that screaming is just noise, but I can hear talking. Eventually said the same thing to my niece. She'd cry on cue. She was 6. When you scream, you're just making noise. If you talk to me, I can hear and understand you. It worked surprisingly well. When my son was a baby, dude cried like a banshee, and he cried a lot. I was the bath giver, and it was especially bad in there due to the small space. So I went on Amazon and got myself some noise muffling earmuffs like what you'd use on a gun range or something, and it made the crying so much less stressful and easy to deal with, so I could just focus on loving him without the noise grating my soul. Maybe not that unethical, but I've gotten negative reactions from some people when I told them about it. There was a post on, I think, AT about parents dealing with an infant who straight up screamed for hours without sleeping much either. One of the solutions that worked was hearing protection for the parents and the baby, because she was also crying because her own ears hurt. Not unethical. People with negative opinions on this can deal with a sick, screaming baby for hours, days and weeks on end. I got one. I fostered difficult teen boys. Obviously their home life wasn't great, and they imitate some bullshit behavior. When I set boundaries they don't like. A lot of kids want to physically fight me because that's the way they've learned to solve problems. Okay, so here's the unethical part. If they want it, I am the one. We glove up and go to the backyard. I block and dodge until they're gassed. They cry out of frustration, and we hug it out. I've gone to work with a shiner more than once. But the kids learn that no matter how bad you are, there's always someone badder. Tough guy shit don't make your problems go away, and a physical contest makes you feel better. My kids have been thrown out of school, foster homes, alternative learning schools, every program they've ever been in. Having an outlet for that energy and anger helps, but it's not exactly ethical to tell a kid if they want it they can come get it. For what it's worth, I think any accusations of this being unethical are mitigated by the fact that you have them glove up and go in the backyard. Putting on boxing gloves is an important way to signify a context change that makes it socially acceptable to fight spar. Swinging on a family member in the kitchen is always going to be considered domestic violence. But if you agree to glove up and spar, it's considered a sport. A lot of times, kids growing up in difficult environments get in trouble because they have a hard time understanding appropriate context for things because it wasn't modeled for them. Teaching them that there are appropriate outlets for the things they want to do is super important and helpful. Friend at school's parents told him he was allergic to alcohol, which they said they found out when he accidentally drank some as a toddler. They told him he was in intensive care and nearly died. On his 18th birthday, they told him they made it up so he didn't drink when underage. I don't know if it's truly unethical, but don't react when your kid falls over. The first thing your kid will do once they have fallen is look to you, and if you panic, they'll panic and start crying. I've seen kids on the playground fall over, look around to see if anyone is watching, and if not, go right back to playing instead of wailing. I save all my tax office envelopes. They are a distinct color in the Netherlands, and every time I hear my child swear, he randomly gets a letter fining him X amount from the tax office. He then hands the money over and I pop it back in his piggy bank when he's not looking. It works. This is so creative, and it's not unethical if you're giving the money back. Maybe put it in a separate jar so he can get his tax return at the end of the year or when he does something good. I pretended that certain foods such as the skin on steamed salmon and broccoli are incredibly delicious and would ask my kids if I could eat theirs. Other parents found it hilarious that my kids would be begging for slimy salmon skin and be delighted when I gave them cucumbers. My kids eating off their plate, disgust. My kids eating off my plate, the most delicious 5-star meal I have ever partaken in, mother. Fun fact, most kids don't like broccoli because they have something enzyme that makes broccoli taste very bitter. Usually changes with time, but some adults keep it. Brassicas, cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, etc. have been bred to be less bitter in the past few decades. Broccoli and Brussels sprouts taste noticeably better than it did 20 years ago. I'm not sure this qualifies as unethical, but my kids sure thought it did. When they were young, they has difficulty gaining weight. It wasn't that they weren't eating, their metabolisms were just too fast. One of the things the doctors recommended was giving them milkshakes every morning. This would pack in the calories, but we realized it would also fill them up so they wouldn't get some other nutrients, and especially any fiber. I began adding chocolate-flavored protein powders and frozen spinach. Turns out frozen spinach is close to flavorless. One morning they caught me throwing the spinach into the blender and had a fit. I told them this was the first time I tried it and promised not to do it again. The next morning I added it anyway, as well as some chocolate chips, so they'd have a special treat as an apology. It was adorable having them come up to me and tell me it was the best milkshake I'd ever made, with tiny green bits of spinach in their teeth. BTW, they're now in their 20s and are nearly a head taller than me and my wife. Not exactly unethical, but one way my mom got child me to stop crying was to rapidly cover and uncover my mouth, kinda like how people used to imitate Native Americans back in the day. The resulting noise I made never failed to make me laugh hysterically and calm me down instantly. Mom's a real cheeky lady. Edit. Fix the tense, sheesh. Just look at ads for children's medicine from the late 1800s to early 1900s to get the most unethical parenting tips imaginable. No matter what problem your kid had, there was some blend of opiates, cocaine, alcohol, cannabis, radium, and random plant extracts for sale, guaranteed to fix them right up. Did you miss not having model rockets as a kid? Buy them for your kids. Buy all the toys you wish you had when you were a kid and enjoy them with or without your kids. My mom would literally change the clock to show our bedtime. And then she'd be like, "Oh, 10 more minutes till 8:30, see?" Telling your kids that the car won't start unless everyone's seatbelt is buckled. It's sneaky, but at least it's for their safety. If you want your toddler to do something they don't really want to do, then ask them a question where all possible answers involve them doing the thing. For example, when my kid was in the bath, they never wanted to get out when bath time was over. So I just asked, "Do you want to climb out yourself, or do you want me to lift you out?" Worked every time. Friend at school's parents told him he was allergic to alcohol, which they said they found out when he accidentally drank some as a toddler. They told him he was in intensive care and nearly died. On his 18th birthday, they told him they made it up so he didn't drink when underage. So I think everyone knows the "don't react initially if they fall down or appear to hurt themselves in some way" trick. Mine goes a step further, act like they may have damaged the thing they hit. Kids love breaking stuff. I diffused a bedtime knock last night in which my son smacked his head against the bed guardrail. I immediately commented that he must have put a crack in the bed, pointing out the already present seam between two boards of the guardrail. He was proud that he was able to do it. Then of course I noted that he'll have to be more careful so he doesn't break his bed, so that he wouldn't keep doing it. Got him from the verge of tears to grinning happily in 10 seconds flat. Something that has only recently been pointed out to me as potentially unethical: pulling your kid's loose baby teeth out. My husband was horrified when I told him my siblings and I never had loose teeth for long, because once they were loose enough, one of my parents would just pull it the rest of the way out with their hands. Sure, it hurt, but the accidentally generous tooth fairy made up for it. I have 5 siblings, and my dad accidentally gave the oldest $20 one time, grabbed the wrong bill. Of course, she bragged about getting so much money for it, so subsequently all our teeth were quite valuable. They did manage to logically explain the value down to $5 a tooth after your initial $20, but with 6 kids, it adds up foul. You're meant to read to your baby often and from as early as possible to help with marriage development. But for a good 2 years they won't understand what you're saying anyway, so instead of the same baby books over and over, I just scrolled through Reddit reading posts out loud. An acquaintance of mine will give his children a necessary allergy relief medication to make them sleepy and get some quiet time. We're not friends anymore. It's okay to do little white lies to get your kid to listen. Sometimes explaining it the correct way still doesn't get through. For example, if your kid has a problem with mooning people, you can just tell them that they'll attract barking spiders that'll attack at the sight of said butt, and then boom, no more mooning. Wow, I was just going to say that changing the words to a song you lovingly sing to a crying baby into horrific historical tortures you can think of that have to rhyme though makes you take out your frustration in a way that doesn't hurt the baby. Sounds horrifying to new parents when you suggest it though. My grandma tells the story of a lady she knew back in the day who, to make her baby eat everything she's given, would make it eat chili peppers beforehand. To this day it hits me hard. When the batteries ran out or were lost on a particularly annoying toy, my mom would tell us, "Oh hun, I'm so sorry. But they don't make those kinds of batteries anymore." We would be disappointed and move on making our own noises for the thing, which was way more fun than the preset ones. Wasn't till I was much older, I won't say how old, that I realized batteries didn't change kinds like fashion brands. Also, when we lived in Europe, the winters were a whole lot colder than we were used to. So once we had all piled into the car and we're heading to church, of course, we'd complain about the cold despite car blankets and being bundled to high heaven. So my mom would tell us there was a light on the dash that would tell her when she could turn the hot air on. So we'd ask about the light. There is no light. She would just watch the engine temp until it was warm enough to pump hot air into the van. I was also much older than I'd like to say when that clicked. Illusion of choice. We can have X or Y. What do you want? This might not be unethical depending on how you feel about it and how you use it. In the end, children, just like adults, want to be treated with respect and decency. They want to know their input is valued.